Welcome to the Ogles Game of the Decade Awards, or the OGDAs. Hashtag OGDA. Now within this, we're going to take every single game that I played between 2010 and 2019. We've created these categories to see which of these games deserves to have its very own OGDA. Which of these games deserves to be honored for being great in some form or fashion over the last 10 years. We got about 19, 20 categories to get through here. Obviously ending with the best game of the decade, or the ultimate OGDA of all. But let's go ahead and get started for the first OGDA, category number 1. Best soundtrack. Now, there were some amazing sounding games that came out this past decade. And there was one game that came so close to winning the best soundtrack award, but I had to actually disqualify for this category. And that game is going to be Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has pretty much every great song from the last 30 years of gaming all in one. But that's also the reason that I can't count it, is because none of these songs were specifically done for that game. Most of the soundtrack was done for the games from which the characters came from. And they're great songs, but they weren't made for that game. And the songs that were written specifically for that game, they were actually pretty weak songs. Now, another great game that came out was Zelda Breath of the Wild as far as soundtrack goes. It was very minimalistic, very beautiful sounding, but I never found myself wanting to go back and load the soundtrack up just to listen to it. The best soundtrack award for this past decade is going to be the game on PlayStation 4, Bloodborne. Now, Bloodborne, from the moment you put the game in, the haunting music kicks in and you know right away that you're in for a gothic horror fest. The levels keep the music low for the atmosphere effect until you reach a boss fight, and then the full orchestra kicks in at max level and you know that you have really stepped into it now. The boss fight music, they're so dynamic and it matches the intensity and the heart-pounding action of the game absolutely perfectly. This is one of the few soundtracks that I load up all the time just simply to listen to it, even without playing the game. So, Bloodborne, congratulations, you win our first OGDA award for the best soundtrack. Best racing game, and I guess because I'm not a real adult, I guess it just simply means best kart racing game to me. And my lord, there were a ton of kart racers this past decade. I mean, just look at them. Nothing says a cartoon property is lazier than just simply pumping out a kart racer with their said character. But most of these kart racers, they're just simply crap with a few exceptions. They all borrow from the best, which is of course Mario Kart. But which Mario Kart would deserve the best racing game of the decade? We have Mario Kart 7, Mario Kart 8, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and Mario Kart Tour all within this decade. Well, one has been rendered useless because of updates, and one has been rendered useless just simply by existing. So that leaves us between Mario Kart 7 and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, I'm going to name Mario Kart 8 Deluxe the best racing game of this decade. Seriously, this game was fantastic. It had so many retro tracks from the years past. It brought in a new IP such as Zelda and Animal Crossing, and the racing itself was more solid than any Mario Kart since Mario Kart 64. So, for best racing game or best kart racer, this is of course going to go to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Best 2D game. Around 2010, it became a trend again for all the companies to start pumping out these 2D retro games of their own independent properties. I mean, my gosh, they were everywhere. It was like sawdust at a beaver convention. But within this, it didn't take long before the father of retro games to step forward and put all the other 2D games to shame. And this, of course, in 2012, Nintendo put out Super Mario Bros. For the Wii U, and this was 2D gaming at its finest. I played through the whole game with my brother at the time, and it captured perfectly the fun of playing games on Saturday mornings growing up. They updated the format with just enough collectibles, bonus levels, and challenges to pull all ages in. And the challenges at the end of the game were actually challenging, which felt way more rewarding for us veterans of the series. Donkey Kong came back as well as in 2D, but honestly, Mario reigns king when it comes to this. So the best 2D game of the decade, this OGDA is going to go to Mario Kart. Not Mario Kart, good lord. So the OGDA for the best 2D game is going to go to the new Super Mario Bros. For Wii U. Best fighting game. Now this decade, the kings of fighting games all came back into play. We had, of course, Mortal Kombat. They put out 3 separate games. Street Fighter and Tekken also made a comeback, and even Killer Instinct, after all these years, finally got a new release. But something was missing with all these. None of those told us that they were the ultimate fighting game. I mean, come on guys, we need some help here. And so enter in Nintendo to let us know that they had the ultimate fighter. Enter in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and it truly did live up to its name, and we even went beyond. Every character from the series was back, and the mechanics of this game were absolutely perfect. Sure, the one-player mode was sort of lame, but so is every fighting game when it comes to that. The online was mostly fixed, and the multiplayer action of the game is absolutely top-notch. I love this game, and I spend more time on this than any other Switch game, and the community around the game is absolutely amazing too. Easily the best fighting game of the decade. So, there we have it, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. You get the OGDA for the best fighting game of the decade. Best SHAQ-FU game. Now, of course, we had Link Fu and Mario Fu. None of the competition can beat the original. SHAQ-FU, you are the best SHAQ-FU game of the decade. Good job on your OGDA. Best RPG. Now, I'll admit, I don't play a lot of brand new RPGs. I tend to play more of the retro ones if I'm going to play the RPGs because I like the graphical style, and the newer ones tend to go on just a tad bit too long for me. But enter in this decade Octopath Traveler to fill that void. Octopath Traveler took everything that I love from the retro era, updated and made it feel brand new again. I love the art style of the game, the overlays, the animations. This game had it all. The stories of each of the characters were so involved and intertwined that it was hard not to fall in love with the game. Top all that off with an amazing soundtrack, and you've got, in my opinion, the best RPG of the decade. Sure, there are bigger ones out there, but this one definitely had the most charm. So Octopath Traveler, you win the OGDA for the best RPG of the decade. Best action adventure game. Now, this decade saw the birth of one of my all-time favorite series, and that is, of course, Dark Souls. Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 are all fantastic games in their own right, and they perfected the action-adventure element. Or, it seemed that way until I played Bloodborne. From Software took all the greatest aspects of Dark Souls, changed the setting to steampunk, sped the gameplay up, and they created what I now call the greatest action-adventure game of all time. This game had it all with so much to explore while battling in a combat system that felt more rewarding and fluid than any Dark Souls game. The boss battles were epic, the enemy design and the levels were haunting, and a difficulty that was perfect for any player and could pull any player into the game. This is how an action-adventure game should be done. So congratulations to Bloodborne, you win the best action-adventure game of the decade, but I do sort of feel bad about this though, because Dark Souls is such a fantastic series, how could it not win this award? And so we're going to create a separate category just for Dark Souls. So enter our next category, which is Best Dark Souls Game of the Decade. Well, 3 in 1. 2, I love you, but I also hate you. Best Remake. Now, within this decade, we saw a true resurgence of all these retro games or all the past generation games being remade or updated or remastered for the new current system. And the remasters, they often look great and they're really cool, but that's not truly a remake to me. A remake is where you take the game, you rebuild the entire code from the ground up, and you got yourself almost a brand new game based on the first game, and it's still the first game, but it's a completely different game, if that makes any sense. Now, we had a ton of great ones that fit this category this past decade. We had Resident Evil 2, Metroid Samus Returns, Shadow of the Colossus, but one remake pulled me in faster than any, The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. I loved the original as a kid, which probably explains why the remake means so much to me, but this remake was absolutely perfect. It took all the aspects I loved in the game and made them feel brand new again, like it was my first time going on this adventure on the island. The graphics captured the dream setting and the charm of the original, while the controls and the mechanics of the game were updated perfectly to make the game feel at home in 2019. I loved the game so much when I was in 6th grade, and the remake only made my love for the game grow stronger. So, Best Remake of the Decade Award is going to go to Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, so congratulations on your OGDA. Micro Murder. Which game chose to kill off a little piece of the gaming industry just for a profit? There's so many to choose from. I'm going to go with Fortnite. Now, Fortnite, I chose this because it has made the most money, and I feel at its heart, it's just simply a cheap game. I've been waiting and wanting and waiting for this game to pass on for years, and it finally seems to be slowing down, which I'm really happy about. I hate games that constantly try and sell you things, and this game pushes it to the max. I mean, microtransactions could be the death of video gaming as we know it, and Fortnite has done nothing but speed that process up exponentially. So, Micro Murder category, the winner for this is going to be Fortnite. Congratulations on your OGDA. Best Sports Game. Whew, this is a hard one. Which FIFA game should I choose from? All sports games pretty much seem the same to me unless they have cartoon characters in them. And who better than Mario to help me along? Now this generation or this decade we saw Mario Tennis Aces come out on the Switch, and I know it wasn't everyone's favorite, but I thought it was a pretty great game. So sure, I like the original better, but for a sports game, Mario, you won me over. I'm not qualified to even really have this category though, and so I'm still gonna give it to Mario Tennis Aces. Best puzzle game. Now I am a simple puzzle man game myself. You give me a virus, I cure. You give me a block, I row. But this decade gave me what I consider to be one of the best puzzle games of all time, Portal 2. They took all the best aspects of the first Portal and they added multiplayer into it. And so within the game, you're basically creating portals to try to reach for the level and accomplish different missions. But with the addition of the multiplayer, it really brought the game to life. Depending on your friend to fire their portal at the exact right moment to catapult you across the level, it's glorious. This game is dirt cheap by now too, so just simply go get it. So best puzzle game of the decade, Portal 2, you win yourself an OGDA. Now, Tetris 99, honorable mention. Most difficult game. Now, I love myself a hard game. Now, not a poorly designed game that's hard because of poor development, but a game that's designed to be hard. I love those games. Now, within this, 2D games can achieve this really well with games like Cuphead, which was crazy hard in some parts, but I never got to the level of frustration of wanting to throw the controller across the room. I leave that title to Dark Souls 2. This was the hardest game of the decade to me. We had Dark Souls 1, we had Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and Sekiro, but none of them could reach the same level of anger and frustration that Dark Souls 2 could muster. It brought a whole new meaning to the phrase "you died" when it appeared on the screen, because after so many deaths, you felt like a little part of you had died. The levels and the overworlds were hard, but some of the boss battles, oh my gosh, holy cow, it took what seemed like 100 tries to beat some of the bosses. The main story bosses, they weren't too bad, they were pretty hard, but the optional and the expansion bosses, they were nearly impossible to me. I put in over 130 hours into the game on the first playthrough just simply to get all of the bosses, and I understand this seems like a massive waste of time, but it was relieving to do it. I love the series, and deep down I do love this game, but I have so many mixed emotions because it made me hate it so much while I was playing it. Hate and love, it's such a thin line. But the most difficult game of the decade, Dark Souls 2, here's your award. My personal disappointment. Now, there were so many games this decade that I was truly just hyped for. Take any of the Dark Souls games, any of the Marios, any of the Zeldas, and indie games galore, but there was one game that I was really excited about that really just let me down, and this was Pokemon Shield. First off, I don't hate this game, but I think I had overhyped it in my mind. I was a red and blue fan, and I skipped most all the generations, basically since Silver and Gold, and I decided to jump back in at this point. I was expecting the same difficulty of the old games and was instantly greeted with a game that was nearly impossible to die. You could pretty much one-shot almost all of the gym leader Pokemon, you were forced to catch the legendary Pokemon, and there were so many cutscenes you'd think you'd accidentally bought a Pokemon movie. The game had the feel of the old Pokemon games at times, but it was so toned down it was almost unenjoyable for the majority of the time. I just expected more from Game Freak after all these years. So Pokemon Shield, you are going to win an OGDA for my biggest disappointment. Best multiplayer game. Now Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, if you don't like this game, you probably just don't like games because there is so much fan service built into this game. Now, the game is also one of the deepest fighting games out there. There's so many characters and so many ways to play each of the characters. The local multiplayer is great as always, and I love to go online and play at the same time. Some complain of server issues, but it almost always works great for me, and I sink hours into it every single week. There's a reason there are so many leagues and championships for this game. It's a highly skilled game that spans the generations and brings all gamers together. Now, a game that can do all of this obviously deserves best multiplayer game of the decade, so Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, congratulations on winning the best multiplayer game of the decade. Best Mario game. Now this decade saw the true revival of Mario. We of course had the new Super Mario Bros. Series, which was brought to its climax. Mario saw some mobile action. It hit the highs of Mario 64 with Mario Odyssey. But while all of these games were great, there was something that was missing: the cat suit. And enter in Super Mario 3D World. This game took all that was great from the new Super Mario Bros. Series and they perfected it in a corner view 3D environment. The levels were excellently designed, so many collectibles to find, and the difficulty, it was just right. Well, until that last level, which was pretty much difficult Mario perfection, it was great to me. The multiplayer was so smooth though, and it accounted for some of the most fun that you could possibly have on the Wii U. Why this game didn't get a Switch release is beyond me. It is the best of the Marios on the Wii U. Great game all around, and it had a cat suit. So, best Mario game of the decade? Forgot the title of the game. Super Mario 3D World. Here's your OGDA. Series that has been beat to death. Call of Duty. I mean, my lord, just let the series die already. Every year we get a new one. It's like a fruitcake. No one really wants them, but they are gifted so much and for so long that we just always expect it. They finally started to mix the formula up a little bit lately here in the last year or so by copying my most hated game. Cool. Then they should just simply retire the game a few years and make people miss the game instead of constantly pumping out a new one every single year. Call of Duty, let it go. Favorite indie game. Now this decade saw the true rise of what indie games could be. We brought so many forgotten classics back to life with a new zest for energy while also giving us brand new classics. Now one indie game that just sort of towers above the rest though and spits down at all that tries is going to be Broforce. It is wonderful 2D action and brings together every movie action hero that ever existed. Each hero is designed with weapons and moves that mimic their movie selves, and they demolish hordes of enemies as they travel through the game, destroying pretty much everything in sight. It takes what it means to be a macho man to the highest level. You got guns, gore, destruction. I mean, I love the game. Plus, you get to kill Satan at the end. So, favorite indie game or best indie game of the decade is going to go to none other than Broforce. You deserve an OGDA. The game I logged the most hours into. Now, this game, it didn't even come out this decade. That's awkward. I put over 130 hours into Dark Souls 2 and probably 100 into Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. However, neither of those really takes the cake. The game that I put the most hours into is going to be Super Smash Bros. For the N64. I've been playing this game since it came out in 1999. Between 2010 and 2019, I am positive I logged the most hours into it of any game. I don't know an official log or have an official log for the hours, but I know my habits and this was it. I know Smash has evolved over the years, but this one will always be my favorite. The combos are incredibly easy to link, the speed of the game is my favorite of the entire series, and so for a game that came out last millennium literally, it beat out every game of the decade for the number of hours I spent on it. So congratulations to a 2-decade-old game at this point. Super Smash Bros. On N64, you pulled me in more than any other game hour-wise. Best overall game of the decade. Now here comes the big kahuna. This is possibly the award you were most waiting for, and possibly the award you skipped all the way to the end of the video to see and ignored all the other stuff and all the other crap that I talked about. Now, there were several games that came close to this. There was, of course, all the Dark Souls games. There was Sekiro. There was Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. There were a ton of great games that came close, but only one game revitalized why I love video games so much, and therefore, the Game of the Decade award is going to go to none other than Bloodborne. This game is literally the definition of a perfect game to me. The fighting is extremely fluid, the environments are hauntingly gorgeous, you have incredible boss fights, and it's the absolute best way to tell a story to me. It's not overbearing and gives you tons of cutscenes. It lets you simply figure it out as you go, and you're not overloaded with dialogue. You just sort of figure it out if you want to dig deep into the story. It literally lets you play the game from the very start of the game. I love it when a game does that, where you just start the game and you immediately start playing. This game is flawless though in every aspect, and I've beaten it multiple times, and I still find myself wanting to go back and pick it up again. If you haven't played this game yet, I think it's like less than $20 now. Go out there and find the game. It's going to engross you for hours and hours. And so the best overall game of the decade, Bloodborne, you win the ultimate OGDA award prize. You win the ultimate OGDA. So there we have it. The OGDAs are complete, 19 categories, 19 winners, and thousands of losers. It'll be an entire another decade before the OGDAs come around. But so until then, as always, find a great game to play and just simply have a great rest of the day.